I am not a bargaining chip. That's what some of the estimated 3 million European Union citizens currently based in the UK are saying as Brexit approaches.
And as that nears, the future of those EU nationals remains unclear. We look at their concerns and how some are responding to living in limbo.
I came to England 17 years ago with £50 in my pocket and a suitcase full of hope. They told me I could settle in England and fulfill my dream of being a nurse. For 17 years, I've been working hard and I fulfilled my dream. But for the last 7 months, my life has been on hold. Theresa May is holding my future at the Parliament, and that's not right. I have 3 children who are born British, and every week they ask me, Dad, will the government send you back to Spain? Let me be clear. My passport may be Spanish, but my heart is British. And
the British government will begin the process of formally withdrawing from the European Union after they trigger Article 50, expected to happen later this month. But once that happens, negotiations with EU member states could take years. And like you just saw, this has caused uncertainty for EU nationals living in the UK. Malika has more.
Some EU citizens who pay tax and contribute to Britain's economy say they put their lives on hold while waiting on the government to secure their rights to remain. Here's another family story about a woman who's married to a British citizen.
I look around and I always wonder, do you think I should be here or do you think I should go back home? I feel like more British than Italian because most of my adult life has been here. We have family. We have property here, we have jobs, we have a dog.
We're not rich, we haven't got a pot of money that we can just dip into and go, we'll move there.
We should be staying legally and be told that we're fine. Please tell us we're fine, because I don't think I can take much longer.
Well, online, people have turned to hashtags to share their concerns. They've been discussing their right to stay, with some sharing what a future without the 3 million could look like. Take a look at these tweets. The government has said it recognizes the contributions EU citizens have made to the economy and to society, but they say the UK would lose negotiating capital if they unilaterally grant them right to remain without securing the same for the 1.2 million British nationals living in European countries. Now, on Wednesday, the argument for reciprocity was defeated when the House of Lords voted in favor of an amendment to the Brexit bill, guaranteeing the rights of European nationals living in the UK. But not everyone was celebrating. One person tweeted, "What a betrayal." Now, you can weigh in too by using hashtag AJStream.
So that amended bill has to go to the House of Commons, but Prime Minister May says the Lords' vote will not delay her plans. With us today to talk about all of this, in Bristol we have Anla Donskoy. She's the co-founder of the 3 Million. That's a grassroots organisation for EU citizens living in the UK. Chloe Wesley is the spokeswoman for the Change of Britain campaign in London. Also in London, Charlotte Coode. She's a former campaigner for the Vote Leave campaign. And Axel Antoni, he is a business consultant living in London. We also invited the Home Office to participate today, but they turned our offer down. Hello, everybody. Axel, you have a lovely wife, 2 kids, living in the UK. What is your current state of mind and also state of citizenship in the UK?
It's a very good question. I mean, my life has changed since the referendum vote on the 23rd of June. I've been here for 18 years. My wife's British. I've got 2 British children. I came here, never considered to become British in terms of taking citizenship. A, because of the cost, B, because of the process, and C, because it wasn't necessary. So my life has changed dramatically. I've started putting things on hold. I was intending to move. Now that my citizenship is not necessarily clear and my status in the UK is not very clear, I'm refraining from doing so. I'm putting my life on hold a little bit because of it.
Charlotte, what would you say to Axel to make him feel better?
Well, actually, what we've just heard from Axel and also in the videos from the Italian citizens shows exactly why Theresa May's right to say that we need to trigger Article 50 as soon as possible. She's right to say that because that means we can start talking, and the rights of EU citizens in the UK is her top priority. That's been stated also in the report by the Committee on Exiting the European Union. It's a top priority, and it's going to be one of the first subject to be discussed in the negotiations, which is why the process needs to start now. And in my opinion, that's why the attempt of the House of Lords to delay the process is dangerous. And frankly, it's just an attempt to score political points by using EU citizens, which is very sad.
I think you've got two issues wrong there. I don't think the House of Lords are trying to delay the process. They're just trying to put a safeguard in. They say they don't want to stop the will of the people to be executed. And the second one is a matter about timing. Everybody, the House of Lords Committee, the House of Commons Committee, the Change Britain chair, Gisela Stewart, German herself, have all called for unilateral guarantees right now. They're not saying we need to wait until Article 50.
So you mentioned the Change Britain chair there, and I want to get in the Change Britain spokeswoman, one of them. Chloe, I want to share with you what our community members are telling us about this. So this is Alberto on Twitter. He says the main impact of this has been a feeling of insecurity, creating great anxiety about the future. Those two words, insecurity, anxiety, are the two top words we've heard from people about how they feel right now. Here's a video comment from someone else who uses those words. This is Adam, and this is what he had to tell us.
Hi, my name is Adam. I came from Poland. I live in UK since 11 years. My both kids were born in UK, and we feel very insecurity after the Brexit referendum. We came to UK to build better future for ourselves and our kids, and now we don't know what will happen in the next 2 years, and we won't be bargain chips for both sides of the negotiation. Thank you.
So Chloe, he's been in the UK for more than a decade. What would you say to him? I know you've been there for about 4 years. Do you share those concerns?
Yeah, I do. I completely understand the feeling of insecurity about your future. I'm a non-EU immigrant from Australia, and I have a visa that expires in a few years, so I myself don't know if I'm going to be allowed to stay in the UK. But the UK government has said that EU nationals that have lived in the UK for 5 years will be granted permanent residency. So that is some comfort to those individuals. But I agree that all EU nationals who are currently living here should be allowed to stay. And that's something that Vote Leave campaigned on, and that's something that my organisation, Change Britain, is also campaigning on.
And Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, but that's not necessarily the truth. I mean, it's about 3.3 million EU citizens in the UK, and of the 3.3, 1.8 million is a number that is always given as people who've been here for 5 years and longer. Of that 1.8 million, the people who have applied for permanent residency, 29% get rejected at the moment. So it's not as easy, it's not as clear-cut as being here for 5 years and you secure your rights. I mean, Anne-Laure, you're closer to it than I am, so.
Absolutely. This is something that's extremely prominent in all the comments on our forum. The rejection rate has been around 30%. It's increasing. There are a lot of issues with people who need a comprehensive sickness insurance, people who need to prove that they're earning enough money to be able to exercise their treaty rights. Also, the form, as we know, has been extremely problematic. It's too long, it's extremely complex, it's terribly unreasonable as a process, and the UK is totally unique in amongst all 28 countries in the way that it requires EU citizens to prove their rights of residency. I mean, there are many countries where just one page applies for the whole family. In many countries, it's free. In many countries, it's a very streamlined process. There's absolutely no reason why the UK cannot implement a similar model here. And also, it will need to do something about it, because it will need to register all those EU citizens in a way that it hasn't done so far, and which it should have done, really.
Yes, and that's exactly why we need to get on with triggering Article 50 so that Theresa May can go to the negotiating table. She has already tried to negotiate a deal with the EU leaders and ask them, can we agree this before we talk about anything else? Can we agree that UK nationals living in the EU and EU nationals living in the UK will be allowed to stay? And there were some EU leaders who said they weren't able to agree at that moment. So that was disappointing, but we need to get on to triggering Article 50 so we can get this settled for all of the citizens.
I will absolutely echo what Chloe is saying. I mean, we wouldn't be having this discussion in the first place if the EU hadn't rejected Theresa May's proposal to settle this discussion in the first place.
All right, Charlotte, we're going round in circles a little bit. Let me just introduce something a little fresher into the conversation. This is Faisal Islam, and he just wanted to say, for comparison, under the same EU law, application for permanent residence forms. Let me just show you here. Ireland has 5 pages and it's free. Germany has 2 pages to apply for residency and it's €8. The UK has 85 pages and it's £65. It starts at £65. But Axel, this is something that you're going through right now. Tell us about that process.
Yeah, it's a quite laborious process. I've got about 2 kilos of documentation to prove all the claims I've made on the 85 pages. And I'm not finished with it yet. I'm still waiting for some of the documentation needed to actually process, to send it off, to be able to process it. So yes, it's a long process. It has taken me 4 months so far to actually gather all the information.
What are you being asked?
Some of the questions are beyond ridiculous. I mean, some of the questions are you linked to a terrorist group? I mean, who's going to answer? Who's going to answer yes to that?
That's exactly what I said at the Common Select Committee. When I presented at the Common Select Committee on exiting the EU, we did point out to those absolutely, totally ludicrous questions that have no place in a modern society and in this kind of process. And also, when I came to the committee, I brought what is going to be my own bundle in terms of application. And it was very clear from all the committee members who were there on the day that nobody understood the reality of what it means to apply for the permanent residence card. And it's only a card, and all it does is actually prove your right of residency. But the actual process is, as I say, is totally ludicrous.
Charlotte, have you started the process yet?
If I may just say something on the process and the paperwork that you're discussing. This is a process that all non-EU immigrants have to go through. So I had to fill out a very long form. I paid hundreds of pounds for my visa. And that's just a temporary visa. That's not even permanent residency. So non-EU immigrants do have to follow these rules. So
you're comparing the wrong things.
Put that in.
Yes.
You're comparing something that is, you want to gain a right. What the 3 million are going through is we are losing a right, and we are just trying to maintain a right. We already have the right to stay here. So the process is a completely different one. One is an immigration process. The other one is not an immigration process. So to compare non-EU immigrants with EU immigrants is just the wrong way of doing it.
So I want to jump in here because I want to elucidate the point that you just made, Axel, via these tweets we got. So this is someone who would push back, I think, on your argument. This is Tika Toes, who says, if they have the quote-unquote right to be here, fine. If not, they're illegal and should go. How long would I last illegally abroad? So this is kind of a rhetorical question there, but he actually got a response from someone. This is Francisco, who says, easy. If you go to a country with permanent residency rights, rights. The Home Office tells you there's no need for naturalization. And then 20 years later, when you formed a family and they had a referendum without your vote, that makes you illegal. You would last for just 20 years. Clearly, this is something that Francisco is dealing with. And Lara, I hear you kind of chuckling there at that first tweet on someone who's pushing back against the right to stay here. What would you say to him?
Well, we do have the right to stay here. That's quite clear from the legislation. Anybody who has been here for 5 years has acquired permanent rights. The whole PR process is just a means of proving officially that we have this right. What is really actually extremely irritating at the moment, to say the least, that even though the UK hasn't yet left the EU, we hear a lot from members who are saying they're now asked from different institutions and agencies to prove that they have a right of residency. From hospitals, we already hear that some hospitals are asking. Bank accounts, it's becoming increasingly difficult to open a bank account. Banks are asking people to prove that they have got the right of residency.
And are they allowed to do that? I want to make this very clear for people. Right now, the UK is in the EU. Are they allowed to do that?
They shouldn't be doing this at all. No, there are certain rules around, and it's been common practice for a few years, but hasn't got nothing to do with Brexit at all whatsoever. Banks should be asking, people for forms of ID and a couple of utility bills. That's normal practice. But on top of it all, asking people to prove that they have a right of residency
surely this is a different problem then. If banks are refusing people on a basis that they shouldn't be, EU residents are entitled to stay in the UK, and after 5 years, as you say, they automatically have a right of permanent residency. So this is a different matter. This is not because of Brexit.
It has been happening since the referendum, is what we're saying, and there are many, many instances which are now being recorded that show that this is actually happening, and there's no need for it again.
What I'm worried about your rhetoric is that this kind of assumes it sounds like you're assuming that because EU residents are not able to prove the residency, they will be somehow kicked out, and I think that just fosters the anxiety even more.
Yeah, but that's not the issue. I mean, the issue is a different one. I mean, if I was a bank or if I was an employer and I am going to give a mortgage, for example, and mortgages are frozen at the moment for people. So there are some banks out there who already, out of their own risk profiling, are freezing people's mortgages or mortgage applications. And it's the right thing to do because they can't prove, nobody can prove of the 1.8 million people, nobody can prove that they have the right to work in 2 years' time when we exit the EU. And I can understand what the banks are doing. I can understand employers being careful and saying, why would I invest money into recruitment fees or into training for people who are joining? So I can understand why they're doing it. It's not right, but the only way of getting around it is going to court, and going to court will not work. I mean, that's quite clear.
We've also heard from applying for jobs not to bother because they are EU citizens, and that again is not right.
Let me just share this with you. Let me just share this with you because I did say that we approached the UK Home Office and they said we don't want to be part of the programme, but they did send us a statement and their position on the EU nationals who are in the UK right now. I'm not going to read it all to you, but this is pertinent here. European citizens resident in the UK make a vital contribution both to our economy and our society, which is why we will be making securing their status, as well as that of British nationals in the EU, a priority as soon as we trigger Article 50 and the negotiations begin. That's really important for this conversation. The question is, do you believe it? Let me just move on a little bit to Malika.
We got this tweet from Stephanie, who was listening to your conversation in the arguing back and forth, and she wants to bring this back down to a personal level. Stephanie says applying for UK citizenship is too expensive. Most of the 3 million can't afford it. The UK government, she says, is exploiting our terror for money. Those are strong words there. Chloe, what would you say to Stephanie?
I would say to Stephanie that I really hope that we can get on with the negotiations soon and guarantee your right to remain without you having to go through this. I think it's so important that both EU nationals living in the UK and UK nationals living in the EU can, as soon as possible, get this confirmation that their rights will remain and that they will be allowed to stay. It's so important.
See,
and if I can just say to Axel and to Anwar, I really do feel for you, and I hope that you don't feel that Leave voters don't want you to stay, because I want you to stay.
That's very nice. Thank you very much. But the reality is very different. I mean, we already know that through Operation Nexus, which is been in progress for the past few months, in fact, about 12 months, a number of EU nationals who happen to be homeless are being systematically deported. So this is already happening to some extent.
What's the atmosphere feel like for you, Anwar? You've been in the UK for 31 years. Have you noticed a change of the way people are treating you now as before Brexit happened?
There's certainly some tension with some friends, but overall friendship has prevailed so far, which is, the right thing in many ways. Shows that humanity is still working.
There's something that you mentioned to us when we were getting ready for this programme that kind of struck me, which is when you were helping a Belgian couple and you were speaking French to them.
Yes, there were two instances that happened in the last few months. The first time, and they were both times on a tube, that's how it happened. In London, there was a couple speaking in French on the tube, and they were clearly lost. They were tourists, and I just happened to be standing by them, so I chipped in my 2 pennies worth of advice and spoke in French with them. And this is how I found out they were Belgian. And somebody approached us, a young man. He was extremely hostile and asked us why we were speaking in a different language. We should be speaking in English, and what are all these foreigners doing here, and blah, 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 blah. So that was a bit shocking, because that was quite early on. That was back in August. And the second instance was much later. It was around November time. Again, I was on the tube, and I did something which I normally do, and usually attracts a lot of really kind and interested attention. I was reading a book in French. So yes, usually this sort of thing would, sometimes bring, oh, what are you reading? Oh, you're French, and you start a conversation about holidays and what have you.
Sure. Let me just share this with Axel's.
It made me feel very
I hear what you're saying. This is a comment from Sheila Morgan. And she says, Axel, why does the House of Lords think they should protect the rights of EU citizens in the UK over those of British citizens living in the EU? This is that whole bargaining chip conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the mantra of the government, and especially the Home Office and Theresa May, the Prime Minister, is wrong to say that not giving us the right to stay right now will put expats, British people in the EU at risk. And I mean, there's a statement out here from the biggest expat organizations across Europe, which is actually saying, I'm going to read out a little bit, UK citizens living in Europe have been following the situations of EU citizens in the UK and regret that their existing acquired rights were not guaranteed by the government as soon as the result of the referendum was announced. And this is the biggest group of expats. So there are at least 10 organizations on here who have all signed this. So British citizens in the EU don't want to be negotiated exactly the same way as we don't want to be negotiated. It's damaging reputation. The EU 27, the remaining states, they're looking at this, they're taking note. So if this is the way Britain is dealing with their citizens, so with the EU 27 citizens, I think that's going to be quite damaging to the negotiation position. And the House of Lords agrees, the House of Commons agrees, Gisela Stewart, who's the chair of Change Britain and used to be the chair of Vote Leave, agrees. Almost everybody agrees. British expats agree. So there is no reason why we keep on doing this.
All right, Axel, hold tight for a moment. And Charlotte and Chloe and Anla, we're taking you to our online post show. But before that, Malika, a closing thought for our TV show.
Hedwig says, I'm one of the 3 million and need guarantee of my right to stay. It's not right to leave us in legal limbo. On the other hand, Nathan says, I have a friend in France also facing uncertainty. Why is the EU not being asked the same questions?
All right, this conversation will continue online at stream.aljazeera.com. Join us there. Thanks for watching. Hello, welcome to our online post show. We're talking about Brexit and the concerns of EU nationals living in the UK. Charlotte, picking up with you, you hear the concerns. I'm sure that they're not new to you. What's the easiest resolution? Because it's a timing thing. It's people maybe not be able to get mortgaged, kids at school. Will this be resolved in April? It's like, how do you resolve 3 million people's issues very quickly?
No, that's absolutely a crucial question, and I completely share the concerns of people who are kind of left in limbo right now. This is why I think we really need to trigger Article 50 as soon as possible, because, again, the government has said this is a top priority, and it will be, because it's not just something that they say. They also have UK citizens living in EU countries, so it's a two-sided agreement, really, and it's mutually beneficial that we settle the question as soon as possible, and we need to guarantee rights of EU citizens living in the UK, because they also make a huge contribution to the UK, and it makes complete economic sense for them to be able to stay. So there's no way the government is suddenly going to decide to kick them out. That's just not what's going to happen. But I agree, it's a timing issue. I agree, it's concerning, and lots of family have concerns, and that needs to be settled. That's why we need the process to start.
The UK has not needed to wait until Article 50 is triggered. I mean, after all, it is the UK which is asking to leave the EU. It's not the EU asking to leave the UK. And there's absolutely no reason why the UK couldn't guarantee those rights unilaterally now. If we wait until Article 50 is triggered, there is a greater danger that we will be treated as bargaining chips, and that those negotiations become more and more complex, and we get diluted.
What I will say is that it's in the interest of everyone in the UK, that's UK citizens, that's EU citizens living in the UK, that the Brexit agreement is as good as possible, and we need the best possible deal, and for that reason we need rights and guarantees to be bilateral, not just on one side,
Charlotte.
And say we make concessions first.
So Charlotte and Lara, I hear your views on the reciprocity issue. I want to share a couple that we got via Facebook. This is Rick, who says this could have been sorted, as our guests on this panel today have already mentioned, last year. It was one of the first things that Theresa May tried to do, but Angela Merkel refused. It's obvious the EU intends on using UK citizens as a bargaining tool. That's one side of the argument. This is the other side. This is Ashley, who says, as a Brit living in Berlin, the only uncertainties have come from the UK Parliament. Germany has been saying it wants to work on a deal to keep Brits in Germany since the referendum. Thus, the only person intending to use expats as a bargaining chip is Theresa May. So, Axel, where do you fall on this debate?
It's quite clear to me. I mean, the vote to leave and the people who voted for leave, and I don't blame them because they voted for their own reasons. I'm not here to discuss Brexit, but the vote to leave was a vote to put 4.2 million people on the negotiation table. It's quite clear. It's the 3 million people in the UK and the 1.2 million people in Europe who were put on the negotiation table at the time this country has decided to leave the EU. So, let me finish this. Therefore, it's not the EU who needs to guarantee rights right now. It is actually morally right for the UK to say, we've taken a decision, now we're going to secure your position here in the UK. Now I'm ready to hear your answer.
Absolutely, otherwise we're being treated as commodities.
Chloe, what was your question for Axel? Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if, I know that people are quite angry at the UK government and they want the UK government to sort this very quickly. What would you say to the EU leaders who refused to agree on a reciprocal rights deal earlier?
They're not refusing. They're not refusing. It's quite simple. The UK has taken a decision. The decision is, and you're absolutely right, Article 15, if it does come to, and I think the Amendment 9B, which is the amendment that was just voted on by the House of Lords, to secure the EU citizens' rights in the bill to trigger Article 50, is not necessary, and it's not the EU's. It's not the EU. The EU cannot do anything until the UK says we are going to leave, and that's a quite clear position, and it's a right position because it's a UK decision to leave. So yes, from a timing point of view, it is right to say, from the EU point of view, we wait until you say what you want to do. But morally, and as I said, 27 states are looking at this right now and saying, what is the UK doing to our citizens in the UK? Morally, it's the right thing to do right now.
Let me share with you, guests. Let me share with you something that Paola asked us, and she says, will Europeans have to apply for residency by default? And question 2, are they at risk of losing their pension contributions? Charlotte?
Well, again, that'll be for the negotiations to decide.
So
but I would say this, I would say no. Well, it's up to the government to decide. And again, there will be no risk, in my opinion. Look, I'm one of those EU citizens here. I absolutely don't fear for my future. I feel welcome in this country still. I'm half French, half German. You know, my parents are not from this country, but I do make a contribution. I do live here. I feel British now, and there's absolutely no way that the government will suddenly decide that we're not wanted here. It's all going to be settled in good time, but I want the government to have the best cards in hand to get the best deal for me, for other EU citizens, and for the whole of the UK. And this is why I campaigned for leave.
Do you realise how unethical this sounds? Having the best cars turns us into commodities. We are not commodities. We are people, and this is absolutely unethical.
But it's our future that's at stake. It's our future that's at stake, and we want the best possible future.
And using people alongside cars and alongside lettuce and tomatoes is what you think is securing the best deal for Britain?
I don't feel like I'm being used. There's no risk at all. The government is not going to decide to kick out EU residents or to make them feel unwelcome. That's not what's happening at all.
Well, but it's not only that. It's not about the right to stay. It's about other things. If you look if you look at the immigration policies currently in place, if you look at non-EU citizens that are immigrants in this country, if you look at it and you look at things like access to social services, access to the NHS, potential access to care should we fall ill, you know, the right to stay is one thing, but I'm really worried. At the moment, I'm protected under EU law to have the same rights as a British citizen. When Brexit comes and nothing has been agreed, and they say, oh, you can stay and you can work, the moment it becomes UK law, my rights can be changed by the UK Parliament.
All right, guests. So much uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty, even from the guests who are actually very much pro-Brexit. Nothing is known right now until after Article 50 has actually been kicked in. To be continued, I'm sure, this conversation. But for now, Anne-La and Chloe, Charlotte and Axel, thank you very much for debating from your perspective the concerns and issues that you have. Malika.
In the meantime, the personal stories continue. This is Dan, who shared his on Twitter. He says, my wife is Spanish. If rights aren't secured, she may have to leave, and we could have to live apart. We have a child born and brought up in the UK, and the uncertainty is horrible, causing us stress and anxiety. We can't plan for the future just yet.
Thank you, guests, for being part of our show today. Really appreciate your time. Take care.